Welcome to Supporters Fund, Ask an Investor. I'm your host, Jeffery Potvin, and let's please welcome Alan Costello, the Director at Resolve Partners in Ireland, as our investor for today. Welcome, Alan. It's a real pleasure having you join us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to the chat.
I'm super excited. I think I was telling you about this before because you've been part of lots of raises. Lots of money's been raised all the way along the channels, and it gets exciting when you get to be in front of an investor who's kind of seen it all, been there, done that. Now you're raising your own fund, so it gets pretty exciting to see that journey. So not only from a startup perspective that we get to be part of that journey with a startup, but we're getting to be part of that with an investor who's going through that same journey. So really exciting today. And the way we like to kind of kick things off is you want to learn a little bit more about yourself. So maybe to start, you could share a little bit about your background. You could go back to the university days. Certainly you can share a little bit from your Novartis days in the pharmaceutical space, what you did there and kind of work your way up, and then share a little bit about what you're doing today. And then we're going to dive into everything.
No problem. Thank you for that. Okay, if we're going to take it back, I am a scientist originally, pharmaceutical science. So that you got a Novartis connection there in what I call my first career. So I did some pharmaceutical R&D in college and in postgraduate. And to give you an example of where my mindset will go, I'm working on some serine protease inhibitors in college, and I went into the professor one day and I said, we're looking at blocking these things. It's something in the Alzheimer's chain. This is great. He said, yeah, maybe in about 20 years, we'll have a product. And I said, bye, prof. I'm off to join the commercial side of the industry. I'm using a little bit of language in the rearview mirror, but I realize now that I just needed to be much, much closer to the commercial coalface, family background in entrepreneurship and all that kind of good stuff. And so I joined the commercial side of the science pharmaceutical industry, commercializing and marketing a bunch of different products for some companies over here in Europe and predominantly Ireland. And that was great. And then I did an MBA and I wanted to get involved in some startups. I wanted to explore building kind of an entrepreneurial career. So I did like all good consultants with an MBA should do. I went out with no plan. No agenda. I just said, okay, I'm going to go out and knock on doors and I'm going to just explore things. I'm going to find ways to make myself useful. And I guess in hindsight, I kind of backed myself to make myself useful to people. So I got involved in a bunch of companies to help them to grow and scale, and including getting involved in some of my own first startups and being a founder in some energy tech companies. So that kind of probably began a transition into the second part of my career, which was all around technology investing, and more so than life sciences, but a lot of technology investing and supporting companies to grow, scale, raise pre-seed, raise seed, raise A rounds, up to the current day where we've got a very heavy focus in the climate technology space, and we're building a fund there. So I guess I find myself at that intersection between I can talk science and technology and product and innovation, and I can talk go-to-market, growth, scale, and then the missing piece for a lot of startups is that finance. So I just started talking to investors and financiers and finding out what made them tick. And now if I can make those three sides of product innovator, go-to-market, and investment finance talk the same language, usually good things happen. And that's where I find myself today.
That's awesome. And one thing about you that nobody would know, this was the mystery question, so I got to throw that back in there. So what's one thing about you that no one would know?
Okay. Well, the cheat on that is that people over here will know it is that one of my hobbies for the last few years, I kind of go deep on hobbies for 3 or 4 or 5 years at a time. So to my left is a former whiskey cask that's been turned into an office light. And to my right is the beginnings of a whiskey collection, which I'm not going to show on camera because it'll not put me in good credit. But I'm a big fan of Irish whiskies and international whiskies. It's a really interesting market from a business point of view, as well as from an enjoyment and a collecting point of view.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. I was looking at someone the other day.
This is neither coffee nor a baby Guinness nor any other comments that you're going to make about that I'll introduce around alcohol and Ireland.
Ah, that's wicked. I saw someone the other day that was taking old skateboards and making them into furniture, tables and chairs and things like that. So I love the fact that you're being innovative and finding different ways to use old products that make things look cool. And of course, enjoying yourself while doing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good hobby.
You know what, we call it the circular economy now, upcycling waste and designing out waste and dealing with waste once you're valorizing waste into better products. So it's the circular economy. I can tell myself that on Friday night when I'm having a whiskey by my whiskey light.
I love it. That's great. And that's a great passion. So it's good to see that we all got little different things that we can do to keep us busy. So now,
Yeah.
taking back to the kind of the background that you have, it's even going back to your pharma days and kind of where you started to make that trend into early stage companies. What was the interest level? Like, what got you triggered, and what kind of made you think I kind of like this space? Because you were operating more in the pharma side, which really there's probably not a lot of entrepreneurship side there. It's all internal and big money and building out businesses within businesses. What had that interest level, or what triggered you to start looking at early stage companies?
It's a good question. So there's probably two big chapters that happened. So when I left pharma, as I said, I could talk pharma, med device, science, but I had worked in the commercial side of the industry, launching products and moving products into the clinical setting in Ireland and a little bit wider field around Europe, and I understood the business principles behind that. And without being unfair, if you're talking to a lot of early stage technologists or scientists or innovators in medtech, they're not necessarily having the bridge to the commercialization skills. So in that sector, yeah, you've got a very long regulatory pathway, which you got to deal with, and that's fair. But I would go in. I always remember talking to one angel investor in the space who came out of the diagnostics industry, and he said, you know, I could make monoclonal antibodies that can react to the glasses that you're wearing, JP, but if it doesn't change a decision at the bedside, if it doesn't change practice at the clinical side, so what? Just because I can build something from a science point of view doesn't mean it's ever going to get used. So I always had that kind of perspective. So you talk to a lot of scientists in maybe university or research institutes, and they were looking to try and commercialize the technologies, raise $500,000 or $1 million, and you knew that they were actually looking at a 20 or 50 million fundraise through the regulatory pathway, and you knew you needed to think about where were the payers, where was the pharmacoeconomics, what were the insurers going to be doing about this product, what was the market size, all of these commercial questions, or maybe investment worthy questions that were coming to the past that was somewhat incidental to some of the science, some of the most important things that they were working on in the clinical bench. I was asking different questions. So being able to bridge that experience and being able to challenge that, I think was kind of useful and kind of challenging in a good way. And then, you know, one of the big transitions for me was I read an article in a business press where a professor in a completely different sector, it was my first foray into, well, sort of my first foray into climate, although we might come back to that. He just published a piece around, this is probably in the early 2000s. He published something about transportation links between China and Europe. You know, it's produced in the East, it's consumed in the West. So he treated it as a logistics problem. He treated it as physics, straight line, ended up describing a train proposition, cost about $200 billion. And that was fine. He just put it out there to the world. And I went up and I look back and I kind of think it is one of the advantages of naivety of youth. I knocked on the door of the head of physics in an Irish university and I said, I read this article. I don't know what you're working on, but whatever you're working on next, I'd like to be involved in it. I'd like to see if I can be useful. And he said, okay, cool. Here's this other project that I'm doing in renewable energy. And we worked on that for a couple of years and tried to get that off the ground. It was probably the first startup really that I was involved in and being a founder of. But so kind of really interesting piece around those transitions, talking tech, talking science, talking engineering at a simple level. I'm not going super deep into the silo, but being able to marry that with, okay, where's this going? What's the commercial questions that are happening here? That's probably been the transition between the first part of my career and what I now call the main part of my career today.
I really like that, because what you've described a couple of different things here that really kind of emphasize the changeover from corporate to entrepreneurship. And I think the biggest one here is that you are being curious, and that your curiosity went into actionable steps. I think a lot of times there is the doubt, or there's the being afraid to question or take that leap forward by forcing yourself into an action, which was go and speak to this professor. So what I liked about that is that you know, if I can build it, does it actually make sense? Which is what your the angel investor had originally kind of coached you by saying, which still creates curiosity, which is, can I commercialize this? Can I do something with this? And then going to that professor and offering to be useful. And what I love about that is that when I was a young chap, my father walked me to McDonald's or drove me to McDonald's and said, go in there and apply for a job. Here's your CV. And he said, when you go in, ask for the manager and shake his hand, look him in the eye, tell him who you are, and tell him that you'll work for free for 2 weeks. And I was scared. I was like, what? I'm 14. This guy's not going to hire me. I was 13. It's like, why? I don't know anything. Why I got to go to the manager? Can't I just go to the person at the desk? He's like, be impactful. Go do something. Show you're useful. So went in and did that. They hired me. And I think taking that same objective from there that I learned is that you need to take those steps and you need to force yourself to go in there and find a way to be useful. So in saying that, when you took your curiosity and you moved that into the next steps, I think that's a big learning for entrepreneurs or for people that want to be entrepreneurs, which is what got you to take that step? How did you force yourself to just say, hey, you know what? I'm smart enough. I'm tough enough. I can go in and make this leap of faith. You called it being young and maybe naive, but I think it's more than that. It was a drive to get somewhere. And you found it, maybe that's just a useful term that you used as being useful, but what is that position that pushed you to do that? I think there's something more there. Is it grit? Is it drive? Is it you learned it from your parents? What made you kind of make that drive forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you know, maybe something we'll come back to. I'm just spinning in my mind off your question there. There's some kind of a balance between startup and corporate, between curiosity and risk. That maybe we'll jump back to, but there's probably a slider bar that's kind of interesting to pull the thread on. What got me into doing this? I've always had kind of a get up and go for doing things. So if I go back, if I'm thinking lately about my climate journey, and I pretty much think the rest of my career is going to be in climate technology. And then I think, yeah, so my first startup was involved in renewable energy. Actually, before that, in the Young Scientist competition when I was 17, we won a prize for a sustainability prize. Actually, before that, when I was 11, I volunteered pro bono, which I'll also come back and pick up your point there on McDonald's. I volunteered at the Ireland's National Ecology Centre to just give walking tours to adults around all the renewable energy technology that was based in that National Ecology Centre. And then I think, actually, when I was 8, I am a complete nerd. When I was 8, I'm writing school projects on the ozone layer. That's what, 1987 stuff. And you're just thinking, okay, you've always had a little bit of chutzpah or get up and go or something that drives you on to do that. So it probably comes from you know, I'm also married to a psychotherapist, so I'm okay with going deep on this stuff. I've been her longest client for 20 odd years. But so the parents are entrepreneurs and had that kind of, there's a story that I learned a lot from them, obviously. And there's a story that when they were setting up business, events conspired and dad had to walk home from a previous job and say to his heavily pregnant wife, yeah, we're starting a bit earlier than expected. We're going for it. So, you know, 3 kids, pregnant wife, started a new business, and you get that kind of push for it. So there's probably something coming from also being for myself, then being the youngest. I kind of learned from everyone that went before me and just was given a lot of freedom to go and explore things, which was fantastic. And, you know, somewhat repeatable, but sometimes you have to, like all entrepreneurship, you need that dose of luck, you need that position, that context that's going to just allow you to knock on the professor's door.
I love it. And I'm going to wholeheartedly say that from all the interviews I've done, a lot of the people that have gone through with entrepreneurial parents have learned to be able to pick things up and go, been learned to take the punches and still kind of figure out how to roll through them and get to where you need to be because you've experienced it. But just that excitement of we're going for it, pregnant with 3 kids and you're ready to roll. I just think I got goosebumps when you said that, because the excitement level of, you know, that's what the risk level is, right? And you talked about that before, like what's the risk level from corporate to entrepreneurship? And I think when you're guarded, I look at Canada as being the country for hugs. US, it's all about capitalism. It's about the punch and figuring out how to keep going. So I'm not sure where Ireland fits in there, but I'm going to assume it fits into the punch and keep going
It's
mentality. So it's, you know,
Yeah, I think Ireland is quite entrepreneurial, and we've got a pretty good ecosystem here. US is ahead of ahead of Europe. I won't speak too deeply about maybe East Asia. US is ahead, and there's things in there about propensity to risk or ability to there's something about frontierism, and there's only a couple of generations in the US that are predominantly driven as immigrants. It's only a couple of generations back that you go to find your predominant immigrant population. So there's frontiers, there's risk seekers, risk takers. There's also some mundane financial stuff that I can just highlight the difference in Ireland. Maybe you can comment to Canada. My understanding is in the States, if something fails, your bankruptcy is, you go through the car wash and you're out again in a year. In Ireland, until recently, that was 12 years. So the ability to take risks that could fail and leave you tied up for, 5 grand debt to the credit card company or 20 grand debt to the bank, that was counterproductive to really driving a lot of people forward. Maybe Canada somewhere in the middle. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, there is a couple of years, I believe, that it does kind of pigeonhole you, but I'm sure that there's always ways to work through it.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to make sure that they do get their dollar base back on those types of things. So,
But to your wider point, and without jumping into the bankruptcy, your wider point, there is something important about an ecosystem. If everybody around you is wearing the same beige trousers, the same blue shirt, and goes into the same corporate HQ every day, that's what you're going to do, and that's what your kids are going to do. If everyone or a disproportionate amount of people around you are saying, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and open a car wash, or yeah, I'm going to go and try and do this tech startup, or yeah, I'm going to take my PhD research and I'm going to be the one that spins out. If everyone around you is doing that, a little bit like context and learning and reduce barriers to attempting the risk is important. So that means, what's your ecosystem like? What's your the people context around you like?
I love it, and it's so true. And they always say, put people around you that are positive or driven, so that you kind of mirror to that. And I do find that as you start to figure out who you are and where you want to be, and even to these podcasts, it's really exploring who you are and where you came from to empower other people to say, hey, you know what, I could be an investor. I've got all this 25 years of pharma experience. I could certainly go out and help some of these early stage companies move forward. And you kind of put that into that triangle of different pieces, from the financing to operations and marketing. There's what kind of things are you looking for and what makes a scalable company? You're always going to be kind of exploring that. But I think taking that understanding of where you came from, and it looks like you came from pharma, and today, and then you moved into health tech, or climate tech, and now from there you kind of circled all the way back through, and now you're back to pushing a fund that's going to be supporting and driving this out. And I love the stories from when you were 8 years old, 11 years old. You literally went back in your history and said, wait, I've got stories from this, and this. Yeah, man, maybe I'm supposed to be in this climate tech. I've been doing stuff in here for a long time. So it's interesting how the things that interested us may not have been the journey that we took, but in time, we eventually fold back into it because that passion and interest is really strong in us. And just at a curiosity at 8 years old, it is the same today.
I think that's true, and it is going to be a learning for or something to be aware of for entrepreneurs. But I think for investors too, you got to follow things that you're interested in. You got to follow things that you're passionate about. You can technically code things to solve this problem over here. You can do this business process automation tool, sell us that. Yeah, fine. But actually, do you care? What are you mission led? Are you, founder problem fit that's in there, or founder market fit that's in there? So there is something about be interested, be curious, be willing to to go that extra mile, that extra depth. I think that is probably also true for investors. Investors probably fall into two hats. They're either former financiers or former founders. And both are relevant, but I think it's probably also interesting to think about, well, what are you looking at from a sectoral point of view or a stage point of view? What are you passionate about? What are you interested in? It's important to follow that kind of true north piece as well.
For sure. You mentioned that in your curiosity and going and speaking with your prof, is that you were reading things and you were diving into interest levels even back then. Do you continue to do that today? And does that take you off your focus, or does it keep steering you in the direction of your North Star, as you mentioned? Because I think educating yourself and learning more about all of these different pieces that are in the world are a good thing, but I can also be distracting. So is there any recommendations you have on educating yourself in a certain space or vertical, or kind of how you see yourself with this?
There's so you have to bear in mind, I did call myself kind of the business nerd, or a nerd for this stuff, and I say that with enjoyment. But for the on-camera bit, I'll just flick around to about maybe a quarter of the collection that's there, and it's going to go into some general. I read a lot of business biographies. I learn a lot from reading about, either in the words of or the words about, other business leaders. I read increasingly on a sectoral basis. So people like maybe Speed and Scale, from that's John Doerr's one, degree, Factfulness, or some of the progress books around kind of positive growth in the economy and positive technology growth. But there's a wider reading piece there as well. So just maybe another thing that people don't know about me mostly is that one whole section up here is the book club, which is going about 7 years. It's about 80-90 books deep, and it forces you to, we push each other to pick books that are in different genres and different things that we wouldn't normally read. So that kind of keeps a little bit of breadth going on and exposes you to new ideas. Actually, in that, I brought Ministry of the Future from Kim Stanley Robinson in, which is a futures book about how climate's going to go wrong, and what might happen about that. So that's kind of an interesting tip if you're into either climate or sci-fi, or a good book. You're on mute.
I've written that down, and that's actually one of our questions in the rapid fire questions, which is
There you go.
a book that you want to recommend, so you get to recommend another one.
Sure.
But that sounds pretty awesome. I'm going to check that out. And kind of on that same subject, there was a couple of things when you talked about, well, there's two things that kind of can touch on here. One is your TED Talk. We're going to get into that in a second, because I did really enjoy it. And I wish TED Talks were just a little bit longer, because it's almost like you got a little bit more to say, but they don't give you enough time. So we're going to let you kind of fill that extra time with some other thoughts. So I'm going to let that one stir up in the mind for a second. But then on the other side of it is that while you were kind of working through the accelerator to get to where you are today with running your Climatetech fund and building that up, there's a lot of learnings that you're going through. You've invested in over 100 companies, and they've scaled up and they've raised over 300 million. So throughout this journey, you've done a lot of great things in working with early stage companies, investing, started your own company. There's a lot of learnings that you can take from this. Is there a few things that top of mind, maybe 3 to 5 things that just pop out that say, you know what, this is how you can really help an entrepreneur from either early onset or at a Series A? You know, think about these 3 things or 5 things when you're talking to investors. Is it
Okay.
You know, right on the onset when you're starting a business, get a coach and then kind of take it from there? But love to get a few of these bullets that you think would help.
Okay. Okay. There's a bunch of things I'll jump into and come back on your point there. So a couple of top tips to begin with. This is going out on the public record, right? I don't care about your product. I don't care about your technology. I will do, but not right now. What I want to care about so much is the problem customer piece. I want to know that as a founder, you're backable, you're investable. If I can see the depth of customer insight you have, that's not insight gained from Gartner or PwC reports. That's insight gained from going out, FaceTime, clipboard, talking to lots of people. If I can hear the problem coming back in the user's words, you know, not necessarily you paraphrasing is a good skill, but if I can hear that problem coming back and echoing back, and if I can see and intuitively see that that's a problem at scale, that's interesting. So I will care about your product, but you know, really, with some exceptions, if I want to engineer a product, I will. You know, if you can prove to me the market demand is such, you know, if I have to throw a bunch of engineers at it for 3 months or a year, or if I have to throw a big team of people, if the market need is there that is fundable, I'll get those engineers to do it. That's it's going to sound really flippant. There are, of course, areas that are patentable, that are unique, that are pure science, or you know, on the bleeding edge, be it quantum or cryptography, whatever it's going to be. Of course, there are exceptions, but broadly speaking, if you want my top tip, I'm going to care less about your product. I'm going to care way more about the problem customer bit, and that actually maps forward. I don't really care what technology stack, what chain you've built your tool on. If you can show me traction that customers are using it, that tells me so much more about your build, your quality of your build, your scalability. It shows me that there are customers who are willing to pay a price. I'll understand that a lot more. Of course, I will look into the product, the technology, the stack, the quality of it, but not right now. I think what I'm really quite interested in founders is those who have insights. And what I mean by that is those who are able to join the dots between maybe mega trends, something happening. So I understand a piece of technology that allows me to scale something over here, and I can understand completely separately over here. There's a group of users who don't even know that their problem could be solved. They don't even know that they can't even quantify their problem, but I can join the dots between the two. That's insight. Maybe it's also related a little bit to vision, but I think about it as insight from the founders. And when you have that, you know that's a real secret sauce. That's a real USP. That a founder is able to discover that, is able to uh, paraphrase that or communicate that, and that can be communicated to customers, to team members, to investors, as the case may be. That's a couple of top tips to begin with. Um, that's a couple of top tips to begin with, and we would have seen that. So you mentioned that we've invested a lot. I personally have invested in a pretty small number of companies, but we were part of the Ireland's National Technology Accelerator. So that had two remits, which kind of links parts of this conversation together. One was to help the startup ecosystem by investing in a Y Combinator type model. And the other was to help commercialize technologies out of the Irish university and research system. So some of that deeper tech piece. And in there, yeah, we invested in about 330 companies who went on to raise like 300 or 400 million in VC, and exits of currently counting up to about 500 million so far. And so it was a great experience, and it's a lot of that early stage pre-seed accelerator style work that we're now jumping on and building on in the seed fund that we're building for Climatetech.
I love it. And those are four great points. And it's interesting that when you get the opportunity, as I have, to interview a lot of great investors and coaches that all focus in on helping early stage companies work their way through. Everybody has kind of their points that they try to make, that they look for. And I love yours because they're not exactly the standard cookie cutter ones that you look for. And I like the fact that you're like, I don't care about your product. And regardless if this is going on a video and audio, it's that I care about what you're going to do with this, what problem you're really solving, and what the customers actually think about this. It's great that I think it's innovative, but if I can't find a customer that actually has this problem and it's innovative, you're really just building for yourself and you're solving your own problem.
You know, if you want the cookie cutter, think outcomes, not features. You know, outcomes are measurable. I can probably put outcomes in units of euros and dollars, time, risk. I can think about outcomes. Features, yeah, okay. I'm the first person in Ireland to create a car company that does blue cars with pink and yellow spots. Who cares?
Remove the tactics and look more for the problem and figure out who wants to spend the money to pay for that problem.
It's completely that. So that then you're getting into, as you say, the tactics of it. You know, it's not pie in the sky. Oh, we're going to solve the world's problems, or we're going to solve climate change, or something like that. Who's going to pay? And what is their budget capacity? What is their how much have they spent trying to solve this problem before? Find me this sticking plaster, crappy bootlegged versions of solutions that they've been trying so far. That tells me that they care enough to try and solve it. That's where you're starting to see big problem, big vision, and the insight to from customer discovery and customer research to say this is really worth going after. This is worth early stage risk, and this is where we can tip the balance of risk and curiosity in our favor.
I love that. Now, taking those 4 points, well, 3 points that you shared, and there's one that I want to kind of add in to explore, and this is the focus part. Is there an element that while you're going through these kind of three pieces on the traction, insights, and the main problem in the customer side, is there something that you're pushing on a focus side? I find the way I love to describe it is that an entrepreneur's brain is like walking into a football stadium, massive, massive stadium, Emirates Stadium size brain, which means there's a million doors, there's a million things going on. And in a corporate world, it's like walking into a 12 by 12 office. They've really to refine themselves down to a box. And you have, as an entrepreneur, you have to really get that entrepreneur to focus themselves to get to eventually that box. As much as they don't want to be there, that's the focus. That's what's going to get a long time to get to somewhere. So is there something that you recommend or you think about when looking at this vision, because you're obviously forward thinking of where this company can go and how this is going to work? Is there an element that comes into all of this that's wrapped around focus and the founder?
Yes, it's a fair point, either to push me on or for me to push others on. Maybe there's sort of two frameworks that I think about in terms of focus. I always remember he'll recognize himself when I tell the story, but I won't name him. But there's an entrepreneur I've been working with for many years, and it was ideas mile a minute, still is. And I remember I was sitting having a glass of wine with him one night, and I went to the bathroom. We were chatting about ideas and spinning up ideas, and that was cool. I went to the bathroom. By the time I came back, he'd registered a URL and had started sketching out the plan on a notebook. And I said, we're just chatting. We're just spinning the ball over a glass of wine. Remember, you've got a business over here that you're still trying to run, not this one. Uh, um, so, in terms of maybe a couple of frameworks or a couple of ways that I think about that, if founders might quite often say to me, we want to do this and this and this and this and this, and I'll say, yeah, but in what order? So I'm cool with a big picture product map, but I'll just put in a timeline to it so that we're going after this module, this set of features first, this set of features after that, this set of features after that. And we all know the plan's going to change, and if it doesn't change, it's probably running into the ground. But it's a way of saying we will be all of these things, but we're not going to do them all at once. Um, an example of that is a company I worked with before. I'll probably reference them maybe a couple of times yet. They went out to customers with a plan on paper, nothing built, essentially nothing built. And they said, look, our system is going to be 11 modules wide. And they talked to customers and said, which one would you like us to build first? So it was kind of co-design, co-development with customers. And but they all, talked to whatever, 10 customers, three of them picked module two of them picked module four, and the rest of them picked one each. Well, they focused on module two to begin with because they already had three customers who picked that. It's kind of a slightly cutesy way of doing some customer discovery. So I'll often think about putting a timeline on a lot of product features and saying, yeah, you will get to this level, but we're just going to stagger it over times. Then maybe the more template version of that is in terms of market sizing. It's the kind of inch wide, mile deep type of analogy that you've probably come across before. You've probably heard about before. I'd love you. I know that the market might be $1 billion wide, but if you can show me the market, the subsection of that market that's worth about 50 million, and if you show me that you can win 10% of that, or 15% of that, or 20% of that, well, the amount of credibility that you have to win each 50 million slice of that billion market is insight that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And I want someone to say, we know the market is a mile wide and it's $1 billion. Here's how we're going to win at this one. I can extrapolate as well as anybody else and as well as they can. And almost by not telling me all of the other segments, they're kind of letting me discover it for myself. And everyone feels good about that. So inch wide versus mile deep. I like mile deep, and then you can always walk the next mile.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that because again, you're taking that big picture and you're breaking it down and you're saying, look, like you said, the market's massive, but show me you can actually go after this little bit. And what does that little bit to you work? And what's the execution on that? And then if you can cookie cutter this into a process, the next 50, the next 50, the next 50 million, they're going to be easy to take down as long as you figured out how to do that in the first 50 million.
I'll give you another example. The company we've been working with, and we brought them through the accelerator, and in their final demo day pitch, there was a little bit of marketing sleight of hand going on that was kind of pretty cute. Here's the first sub market. It was a particular code of a sport in a particular geography. We're already 15% of that market, and that market's worth 5 million euros. And here's the next market that we're going into, and it's worth 3 million euros, and people are looking up at them going like, what the hell? Yes, you can get 15% or you've got revenue, but what's the deal? And the founder said, but that's not why we're here. Here's the next market. It's worth 450 million. So now if you've built up the credibility that we can get the 15% of this market, we're going to enter this market, this is the prize that we're going for. And everybody in the audience went, okay, I see what you did there. Thanks for being cute with that. Let's go.
I love it. Good way to coach them into it and get them to understand the direction you're taking. So now, taking all this great insight, and the one question that I was really intrigued by was, of course, I have to go back to your TED Talk. One, I thought it was very well done. So it was great to watch that. In the TED Talk, that while you were talking about Twitter and where it's going and where social media was going and how we're engaging with social media back in 2017, how do you see and how have you witnessed the changes? And is there anything in your TED Talk that you would alter today to say, you know what, or support bigger from what you said? And I know this is totally off the cuff, but this is while we're transitioning into the next phase of the talk. But because I'm always curious when something is so well done and so publicized, that now kind of when you look back at it, is there something you'd say, you know what, I changed just one thing, but the rest of it was awesome?
It's interesting. Okay, so you've spun me one from left field there, and it strikes me. So the context of my talk a few years ago was, do you know what? Technology has its problems, but we'll solve them. We'll get better, and technology is a better enabler of good than the downsides. And we're looking today, the last 5 years, I think. So what's changed? Social media networks have probably largely got worse. They still perform their function of connecting people and building up a network and community of people, but they've probably got worse for a lot of the issues, and whether some particular social networks are going to get acquired in the coming days, actually, as we record this, and what happens those, and you don't have to make an overtly political stand to say that the regulation of social networks probably needs to catch up. If you look at those in particular, because they got big and they got a new use case around connecting people through technology much faster than regulators or governments were ever able to catch up. And I don't think they're able to self-regulate, and I don't think their communities are able to regulate them. So would I change it? Probably not. I'd probably put that nuance in there to say that some segments of it are worse. But is technology a good thing or is it an enabler? Yes. Is our self-driving cars going to kill less people and reduce the insurance industry? Yes, that's a good thing. Is technology are we on kind of Wright's curve of learning adoption around solar PV on and offshore wind, and that's going to solve issues for us around fossil fuels, carbon, or even geopolitical issues like we've got with Russian energy, Russian gas coming out of the Ukraine war at the moment? Yes, technology is going to be a better thing for that. Does AI need to be regulated or supported or monitored? Also, yes. So I'm not going to change the premise of my TED Talk. I think technology is a great enabler and can be a great enabler for good. I think regulation hasn't caught up with it. Possibly in Europe, we're catching up a little bit better with it than they are in the States or in the Far East. And that's only because regulation perhaps is a little bit more independent through the EU that we have over here. But perhaps if you do get regulation out of the EU, the American tech companies are going to have to follow suit, and we'll see what happens with maybe the Asian companies, where ByteDance have a huge presence here in Dublin, and we're aware of that. So it's not a simplistic argument, but I'll still stand over technology. It can be and is a force for good, particularly then maybe when you look at new technologies that we need in renewable technologies or climate technology.
So to the point that you shared about Melvin and his 6 laws, I think that you can almost stand behind those to say that regulation is still something that's needed. and there needs to be more government intervention to kind of govern, I guess, over some of these techs, especially how they've gotten to where they are today. So I think wholeheartedly your TED Talk was awesome, and it still is awesome today, and it's very relevant. So I think, like you said, adding in a couple of little benchmarks, they still they fit there. But I think the biggest benchmark of all of it is that to your point, is that there has to be some form of governance somewhere in here, because the things have grown so significantly that you're losing that control, and everything else, technology is kind of taking its own direction, and maybe the robots will become more human than we ever imagined, and maybe that's not a good thing if it's not monitored or regulated.
I mean, I'm pretty much pro regulator, if you like. Now, of course, obviously, you want that to be, you don't want that to be unwieldy, but we regulate things. You know, we don't put consumer finance in the hands of anybody. We regulate them through central banks and through regulatory authorities, and we've had some issues with that in Ireland. We don't put devices into the hands of toddlers without it going through a CE mark or without it going through an equivalent in the North America. So we live with regulation. We have environmental standards. Whether the regulators are resourced enough, whether they're agile enough, whether they're influenced too much, that they're questions. But you probably can't argue that the technology industry has grown faster than any regulation has been put in on it, and probably the only one that that triggers a little bit is antitrust around M&A activity. You're seeing a bit of that in the US. Actually, this week, the UK regulators had an issue with Meta buying Giphy. So that's probably the only regulation really that's coming through. A little bit, of course, GDPR from the EU. But regulation hasn't caught up with the technology, or technology has moved faster than regulation will move. That's something that needs to improve.
I love it. Agreed. Well, just before we transition out, I guess the next question is on the race that you're currently working on and pushing through on this climate side, which I think is amazing. Again, something that's totally needed and something to get behind. Where do you kind of see the next 5 years looking for Climatetech? Where does the interest lie for you? What types of companies do you want to see? And what kind of how's the fund going to work?
Sure. So there's a couple of pillars within the thesis. One is that we need climate technology. We need to both decarbonize and then replace with renewable technologies, electrification, change some of the food and ag practices, change some of the energy utilization practices. We need to do that for the world's sake, 2030 targets, and our world, our economy, our biodiversity. There's so many downstream effects of what's coming to that. So we need to do it. We also think it's a fantastic investment opportunity for companies that are operating in that space. So so that's one big part of our thesis. Another big part of our thesis is we don't think startups are going to save the world. And let me explain. A startup isn't going to be able to, starting now with 2 people and raising the first, 200K or 500K, we want to have real strong impact. So we want to build a support structure around startups and scale-ups to help them get through their seed, their A round much faster and much better, get this real breakout trajectory where they can start having impact. So rather than going, over the first year or two to, a million, a couple 100,000 users, a couple of million in revenue, we want them to really push much harder than that. Of course, you normally do in venture, but this climate piece is giving added incentive to do that. So in the fund, we're building an ecosystem of climate advisors, of business scaling advisors, of back office supports, and really importantly, we're building a whole support structure of corporates, those who are either high energy users or maybe they're involved in energy and renewables, so that companies can, let's say, test is probably a better word than practice on, but that companies in the portfolio can work with these large corporates, test solutions, get some data, get some pilots coming out, showcase what they can do, so that when they are expanding internationally, they've got early reference customers that they might have been harder to get as a startup just going in and knocking the door, even though I know that we had that part of the conversation earlier on. Also, in some cases with corporates partnering into the fund, you may have an opportunity to platform these scale-ups and help them to grow internationally much faster. So that gives us a better investment return, and that also gives us a better impact when we're trying to do things around improving the climate situation and improving climate technology. So we're building a 50 million euro seed and A stage fund based in Ireland for technologies that are across I suppose the climate plinth. So we'll look at renewables, we'll look at food and ag, we'll look at energy reduction, we'll look at for mobility, because we want to have a spectrum of companies that are all trying to drive that on. What I'm probably excited by, or what I'm interested in, is probably convergence of ideas. So we're the last, what, 10, 20, 30 years, we're really, really good at building solutions in the cloud. We're really, really good at building solutions involving data. We're really good at building solutions around robotics and hardware. But energy hasn't seen a lot of that, or food and ag hasn't seen a lot of that, or mobility is increasingly seeing that. So I'm interested in seeing founders who have experience and depth of expertise, maybe from building other solutions, maybe enterprise SaaS, and how does that apply into an energy utility? How are you going to help an energy utility transition into renewables or get more renewables onto the grid? So almost, if you think about it, it's almost supply chain. It's almost the process optimization. You know, if you look at renewables in Ireland, we're doing 36% of our energy mix is coming from renewables. That's not frontier technology. We're not probably going to, well, never say never. I'm probably not going to think about investing in new turbine blades. That's for Vestas and Siemens and SSE and GE and Philips to do. But I'm really interested in technologies that can help get more of that grid, more of that power onto the grid, maybe a little bit more predictive around the weather conditions so that we can optimize how much wind is going onto the grid versus gas. So I know I've just dived down a silo there, but if you think about it, if I lift that back up, I'm interested in things that are going to maybe process optimize across renewables. I'm interested in technologies that are used well in other sectors, now coming into energy, food, ag, mobility sectors, and be able to jump faster and leverage that expertise.
I love it. Those are some fantastic goals and ideals that you guys are supporting, and I think it sounds like it's going to be very beneficial to Ireland and surrounding countries. So I think it's a great initiative. So we're going to kind of step in a different direction, but we're going to talk a little bit more about a case study. And I know that you've chatted to a bunch of companies in our chat here about things that they've done to kind of interest you or kind of move their way through the ecosystem and change their modeling or get to the right position to sell to their customers. Is there anything that pops into mind? What we're looking for is what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And, you know, sometimes it's the tough, it's grit, it's hard, it's easy, it's a roller coaster ride. Is there any experience that you can share that she or he founder went through, or even that you read that you find that might be a really useful story for someone trying to break into the entrepreneurial scene?
Sure. Okay, so I'll talk to a real example. I'll probably keep the details high level, but they're a company that has a lot of resonance for where we're both sitting in Canada and in Ireland and in clean tech. So started working with a company probably 5 years ago called Elm Environmental here in Ireland, and they were doing I suppose business process work for people like the water utilities or the environmental utilities or regulators in the space. They were good. They had a good background, you know, good management consultants, came out of Accenture, knew what they were doing, knew how to build a team of people. But it was all services, and they started developing out a framework that would help water utility companies to manage their data a lot better, to be almost an operating system for how a water utility works, from environmental through to the billing on the customers. So they always had this balance between, okay, how do we build with maybe early conversations with customers, but we've got this other stuff and we've got to keep the show on the road, and we've got to do a little bit of services and consulting. And there was always this kind of balance while they were building enough traction. We then helped them to raise a seed round in Ireland and laterally a seed round from some US and based investors. But in terms of the grit and getting to the customers, the two founders left Ireland. They moved to Toronto, where they've been building their business ever since. I think they now employ about 70 people, and they're servicing mostly the North American water utility market. Although I think they're doing some interesting stuff in Australia as well. And they a lot of European companies. And particularly, I'd say a lot of Irish companies will look at the UK until Brexit happened. We didn't look a lot at Europe. We didn't look a lot at the Far East, but it was pretty natural jump, even though it was 5 hour time zone and a 7 hour flight, to look west and to think about the US and increasingly Canada. I was on a trade mission to Toronto a number of years ago with a smart thermostat company that I've been involved in, and increasingly Canada is getting more recognition from European companies. So they're now known as Clear. They raised a seed round in the States. Then last October, they closed an A round from Insight Venture for about $16 million. They employ about 70 people now, I think most of them in Canada. And, if you look at that grit and determination, it was just a case of we need to go to where our customers are. When the two founders left, there was one child between them. I think there's 4 children between them now. I must send this podcast to them for reference checking. And they just had to uproot and move to where their customers were. There was tough times within that journey. There was tough times on a cash flow basis. There was tough times dealing with customers and transitioning from services to product. But that services to product bit is something that we probably see a lot of founders over here doing, particularly in the enterprise or enterprise software space, where you're delivering something and you productize afterwards or you automate afterwards. We focus on the outcomes, like we talked about, and how you build the solution to deliver those outcomes. You can do it with a bunch of people and do it as a service, or you might start that way and then you might have to build a product afterwards, which are different skill sets. And you've got to, as founders, you've got to be like a swan, sailing on the surface, and underneath the surface, what's going on with your team and your people and your customers. So they're a fantastic case study. They're going to be a brilliant company. They're going to be brilliant for the Canadian system, and they're going to be brilliant for their customers too.
I love it. Great story, and I love the perseverance and the dedication to uproot your where you live, to go after your customer and go after your business. And it makes it even better when it's Canadian that they went to. So it's or Canada that they jumped into. So it's a good mix of Ireland and Canada kicking butt. So I like it.
We will take that. And as I say, there's an increasing number of companies looking at there between, natural resource tech centers. You've got that connection around Toronto and down south, where there's like 40 million people living within an hour of each other. So it becomes this major target center for companies to expand into. You'd never encourage a company to launch in the US. You launch in these 3-city area, you launch in that 3-city area, you launch in that part of Southern California, not all of it. But it's the same thing just as you're scaling. You don't launch in France. You launch in this region of Paris. You launch in this sector of geography, or you launch with this cohort of companies. Otherwise, it just becomes like that inch deep, mile wide market piece. It just becomes too dilute. So there's a focus piece there as well. So Canada's getting that nice focus, not least maybe with some of the political challenges that are happening a little bit south of you.
For sure. And there's a good program with Startup Visa and a few other things that help bring entrepreneurs into the country. So it works out quite well. So now we're going to transition into the rapid fire questions. Are we ready? We're going to start with the business ones first.
Go for it.
All right. So as an investor, you choose A or B. Okay. Founder or co-founder?
Oh, that's a pain. Are you asking, like, should it be
one or the other? Which one do you like best when you're investing?
Oh, it has to be co-founders. Co-founders.
Okay. Unicorn or a 4-year 10x exit?
That's a good question. You know that unicorns don't technically exist, right? They're mythical. They are privately funded, not exactly validated by the external markets. Oh, as an investor, I'll take a 4-year 10x.
Okay. Tech or CPG?
Tech.
NFTs or Web 3.0?
I Personally, I'm kind of interested in NFTs. As an investor, I'll say Web3,
Okay. AI or blockchain?
AI.
First time founder or second, third time founder?
I mean, from an investor's point of view, you got to say second time founder, second or third time founder, but that's almost dismissive of first timers, which it shouldn't be.
Fair enough. First money in or Series A?
Will be first money in.
Angel or VC?
They're different things. So as an investor, well, VCs for the deeper check, angels for the sectoral expertise. So if you force me to choose, if I'm a startup, I'll choose angels.
Okay. Board seat or observer?
Observer, but that's a function of the quantum of companies that are in the portfolio. Observer with the right to step up when you need to.
Okay. Safe or convertible note?
We're increasingly using and seeing safes in Europe, so happy out.
Okay. Lead or follow?
Will lead. It will lead in the seed rounds, and that's what I like doing.
Love it. Equity or interest payments?
Well, safe and then into equity. You know, we're part of it.
Okay. Favorite part of investing?
The first word that came into my mind, and I'm smiling because it's the first part of our conversation, learning. We're so lucky. We always get to learn from founders and from people that are smarter and telling us about new things. So learning is pretty cool.
I love it. Agreed. A number of companies invested per year?
We'll be doing 10 to 15 companies per year.
Okay. 2 qualities a startup needs in order to stand out to you?
They need 2 qualities. They need really, really strong voice of the customer, insight from the customer, and they need to have an ambitious plan. That's 2 words. So ambition is kind of growth vision, and a plan is they need to know how they're going to get there. So an ambitious plan.
Okay. And then we did talk a bit about the verticals of focus, but if you want to reiterate a couple of them, that works too.
Yeah. So our fund is going to be investing in predominantly in Ireland at the seed stage. We like a broad climate pillar, so that's going to come across, you know, energy, food, ag, mobility, energy, renewables, and energy reduction.
Perfect. All right, we're going to move into the personal side. We're almost there. Book or movie?
Book.
Superman or Batman?
Batman.
Restaurant or picnic?
Restaurant.
5 minutes with Bezos or Oprah?
Sorry, 5 minutes of Bezos or Oprah?
Yeah.
Whoa. Oprah's going to be more interesting.
Agreed. Mountain or beach?
Oh, I do like both. You're going to make me pick one? Beach.
Bike or run?
I run badly, so go for that.
Big Mac or chicken McNuggets?
The lesser of 2 evils, Big Mac.
Trophy or money?
Trophy filled with money. No.
Best answer yet. Beer or wine?
Wine.
Camera or mobile phone?
Mobile.
King or rich?
Sorry, king or rich?
Yes.
Oh, that's a deeper question. Well, you know it's a deeper question. King or rich? Does a king get to set taxes? I'll go with that.
Concert or amusement park?
Concert.
Fortune cookie or birthday cake?
Birthday cake.
TED Talk or book reading?
Is that to watch or to view? I'll go. That's an interesting one. I'll go TED Talk. It's an easier answer. Possibly the right answer is book reading, but I'll go TED Talk.
TikTok or Instagram?
I'll go TikTok.
Facebook or LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, unfortunately.
No, that's good. Most famous person that pops in your mind?
You've just been talking about King. You know, we got that going on over next door in England. Geez, King Charles. Where am I going with that?
Favorite movie and what character would you play in the movie?
Oh, yikes. I should have prepared for these. Favorite movie. Oh, I'll tell you what, I'll go super niche. There's an Irish film that is possibly getting tipped for foreign language Oscar called On Colleen Kuhn, which translates to The Quiet Girl. There's originally a book actually, and that film is incredible. If you get it on any kind of release, wherever you're listening to this from. What character? Sorry, is it a character from that film that I have to choose, or?
Correct. Yep. Yes.
Well, it's going to be a bit of a moot one because no one except outside of Ireland is going to have seen it. But there's the uncle-in-law is kind of a quiet, kindly type. I'll have to go with that.
Okay. You'll have to send me the link to it.
Okay.
Favorite book?
Favorite book. This is going to be a time. First one that comes to mind. It's often one I talk about. It's The Godfather, the Mario Puzo. Obviously, people often talk about the films, and should, but the book is kind of incredible as well. That one will come to mind. There's probably an interesting book actually to a theme I did earlier called Factfulness. I'm just looking at it over there. I think it's by Hans Rosling, who's a Danish GP who died, and his daughter is taking on his work. And it's kind of like my TED Talk. It's kind of saying the world has got to improve, but you know what? We're already doing okay, and we can get better. In the Zoom chat, I've just put in the name of that film, by the way. Yes, that book was Factfulness by Hans Rowling.
I love it. I'm going to copy that as well. All right. So we're almost there. What's the first brand that pops into your mind?
First brand? Probably Nike.
Okay. Favorite sports team?
So English Premiership team called Brighton. I went to college over there, so that's about the affinity I have.
I love it. I used to ask if you were an Arsenal fan or Liverpool
Chelsea
fan. It doesn't even matter, Chelsea, but no one was an Arsenal fan, so I had to remove the question. So I decided that I'd be the only one being an Arsenal fan. But then I did find that in Rwanda, they're very heavily into Arsenal. So I'm like, okay, maybe I can move there so that I can be around Arsenal fans. So
yeah, but you
all right. Last two questions. What is the meaning? Go ahead.
Sorry, go on. You go ahead.
What is the meaning of success to you?
Achieving the goals.
And last question. What is your superpower?
I'm going to say something like communicating complexity, which, by the way,
like
usually involves me oversimplifying things. Like if you need to build a product, you'll just throw some engineers at it. But I'll probably say something like communicating complexity.
I like that. I think from our discussions that we've had, I would say that you're also very good at forward vision. So you're looking forward on what you're building, but you're at least understanding the marketplace or the space and then where that's got to go. So being a visionary certainly helps when you're working with early stage companies. So tying that in with your superpower, I think it's pretty amazing, and it'll work out quite nicely when you're building out your fund.
Sure. Well, hopefully so.
I love it. Well, Alan, I want to say thank you very much for all your time. I literally took so many notes. The piece of paper has no more room on it, so I'm not even sure I'm not going to be able to read that when I go into my last dialogue part. But fantastic. So much great information. I want to, again, take the time to appreciate all of that you shared. again, thank you for all the stories and including us with all of this great insight. And the way we like to kind of end our show is that we want to give you the last word. So anything that you want to share to the founders, to investors, I turn it over to you. But again, I want to thank you for all your time and sharing with us today.
So thank you for the opportunity. It's an enjoyable chat, even when you were throwing me some left-wing curveballs. Maybe the one thing I'll say is in our climate world, Climatetech fund, related to the Climatetech fund, related to the work that we do with corporates and scale-ups, we're running an accelerator program called accelerategreen.ie, and people can come and check that out, whether you're a corporate, whether you're a scale-up. You can see some of the work that we've been doing with an Irish energy company, or an Irish climate solutions company. So accelerategreen.ie, and from that you'll find loads of links to us anyway.
Perfect. And if anybody wants to reach out via LinkedIn or email,
yeah, happy out. LinkedIn or carrier.
Do that, no problem.
No problem.
I love it. Alan, thank you very much again for all of your time, and we look forward to staying in touch in the future.
Thanks very much, JP. Appreciate it.
Okay, that was a great conversation with Alan, and what I loved about kind of all the great insights you shared was that I don't care about your product. What I do care about is your customer, defining the problem, and your customer traction. I thought that was a really good way of kind of sharing that. And then what are your customers willing to pay? Have you gone through and done the testing to make sure that your customers want to pay? And then insights, joining the dots, putting this whole picture together. I think that also really defines how this startup world works and how you need to operate with inside of it when you're looking for funding. And then, of course, to round it all out is that focus. I think focus is kind of number one when it comes to understanding your business, your product, and where you're going with it. And to his point, it really kind of drives what that outcome is going to be. And focus is built into your insights. It's built into traction. It is defining your problem and going forward and helping all of those through it. He shared some great stories around founders and how they do need to focus a bit more. So I love that it really came down to it. Don't care about your product. It really matters what your customers think, how many people have tested your product, how many have really driven into what you're doing, and you're solving the problem and you're showing that. Taking the big picture, breaking it down. He used the reference of an inch or a mile deep. And again, how you look at that and how you kind of build your company is going to make a real big difference. I think in the climate side, they're doing some great things. They're raising some big dollars, and they're going to make a big difference in Ireland. And I think that's really awesome. And hopefully that will cascade into other countries as well. But overall, it was a great discussion, and super glad that we had that opportunity to chat. So thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please feel free to share with your friends or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and or Stitcher. Feel free to share an audio or video clip around our show, and we may include it into one of our future podcasts. You can find us at marketing@openpeoplenetwork.com. Your support and comments are truly appreciated. You can also check us out at supportersfund.com, or for startup events, visit openpeoplenetwork.com. Thank you and have a fantastic day.